to 2nd edition Wargaming. I'm Rob, and in this video we're going to cover vehicle combat in 2nd edition Warhammer 40k. Okay, so in this video we're going to primarily cover rules that are to do with vehicle combat. So shooting at vehicles, vehicle shooting at other models, ramming, things of that nature. The actual movement of vehicle I'll probably cover in a separate video that covers movement throughout the 2nd edition. Also, there are some additional rules that came out in articles, mainly Tankfest, which came out in the Citadel Journal. And there's some pretty good stuff in there that makes vehicles more survivable and more fun to play. So I'll tag those in as and when they're relevant. Okay, so first up, shooting at a vehicle. Now, there are minus modifiers for shooting at moving targets in 2nd edition. So a vehicle moving between 10 and 20 inches, it's a -1 to hit for the attacker. If the vehicle is moving over 20 inches, it's a -2 modifier to hit. There are also cover rules for soft and hard cover, and if a vehicle is at least 1/3 covered, then it will gain the minuses for that cover. So -1 for soft cover, -2 for hard cover. There are also +1 for large target rules. The description it gives as a large target is a tank, a building, or a large creature. So really it's best to decide between players what actually counts as a large target. Once a successful hit is made, the attacker rolls for the location hit on the vehicle's specific data facts card, and this will list all the locations specific to that vehicle. The attacker will roll, you'll get the location. He must then try to pierce the armor value of that specific location with the armor penetration value of the weapon, which is often included in its stats. If you manage to penetrate the location you've hit by rolling equal or over its armor value with the weapon's armor penetration value, then you can roll on a damage table which is specifically tied to that vehicle location. Should that location have already been destroyed by a previous attack, then that shot is wasted and no further damage is done to the vehicle. If the vehicle is hit by a weapon with a blast marker, then place the center of the marker on the visible location that you intend to hit. Then roll to hit, taking into account any modifiers. If the shot hits, then the location under the center of the template or blast marker is hit, and every other location, partially or fully under the blast marker, is hit on a 4+ on a D6. Roll for penetration of every affected location. If the shot misses, then it will deviate from the originally targeted location. The other thing worth mentioning is the loss of penetration over range, as per the table supplied in the rulebook. Now I'll cover some of the optional suggestions from the Tankfest article. Okay, the first of the suggested changes is to vehicles in cover. So if a vehicle was benefiting from cover but is visible, then you can fire at it without minus modifier. But should a location that you hit be obscured by the cover, then there's a chance that that cover will absorb some power from that shot. And how that will work is if it's obscured by hard cover, then you will have to attribute the hard cover an armor value. And there is a list in the book of suggested armor values for buildings and rocks and things like that. So if it's hard cover, the actual attacking shot will be fully absorbed by that hard cover, and should you penetrate its value, the cover will be destroyed. If the vehicle location that you've hit is partially obscured by soft cover, then for every inch of soft cover that the shot has to travel through before it hits the vehicle is a -D6 to its armor penetration total. The second suggested rule change is to template weapons on vehicles. So as I previously stated, the location directly under the center of the template is hit automatically, and it will be rolled for penetration with the weapon's full penetration value. But all the other locations which have been partially or fully covered, and then you roll a 4+ to see if they're included, any penetration rolls against those locations would be done at half the penetration value, rounding up. Now, I really like this because it just makes vehicles so much more survivable against shots from multi-melters or battle cannons, which would otherwise devastate them. Next up, vehicle shooting. In the main rules, it states that all crew members, including drivers, may fire one mounted weapon on the vehicle. This includes move or fire weapons unless it otherwise states in the vehicle's data facts. If troops are being transported in the vehicle, then they may fire their weapons as well, providing they are not move or fire weapons. If the vehicle is open top, then any and all transported models may fire their weapons, providing again that they're not move or fire, and the driver will not block line of sight. If the vehicle is enclosed, then one model may fire through a viewport or vision slit, and up to 2 models can fire through any doorway or hatch. The main rules state that a vehicle may move and still be on overwatch, providing the vehicle weapons are controlled by a separate gunner. Tankfest confirms this by stating that the driver may not fire any vehicle weapons on overwatch, but transported models and gunners may go on overwatch as normal. Also, any turrets that are on overwatch will have their arc of fire reduced to 90 degrees. On to ramming infantry and overrun attacks. Walkers and skimmers cannot deliberately ram other models, but they may hit other models if they go out of control from either damage or psychic powers. The main rules state that if a model is hit by a vehicle travelling 10 inches or less, then the model is simply put to the edge of the vehicle, clear of its path, and is unaffected. If the vehicle is moving over 10 inches, then the model must make an initiative test to get out of the way. The first model will make the initiative test on his standard initiative, the second will get a +1 to his initiative, and the third +2, and so on, as they have more chance to jump out of the way of the vehicle. In this instance only, a 6 always fails on the initiative test, so there's always a chance of getting even the 10th model that you're ramming. If the initiative test is failed, then the model will take a hit from the vehicle's ram value, which is stated on its data facts card. The vehicle in return will take a hit from the collision with the model, but this will only be a D6 armour penetration plus the toughness of the model hit. The Tankfest article adds to this, stating that a successful initiative test only allows the model to move 2 inches towards the edge of the vehicle. So if it's a big vehicle and that 2 inches isn't enough to clear it, then you'll hit anyway. Okay, so that was infantry. Now we go on to vehicles ramming other vehicles or buildings. If a vehicle deliberately or accidentally collides with another vehicle or building, then the locations that actually physically touch are automatically hit. Every other location on the vehicle or building is hit on a 4+. If it's 2 vehicles that have rammed or collided, then they use their ram value to try and penetrate the other vehicle on any affected locations. If a vehicle has hit a building, then it tries to penetrate its own locations using its own ram value. But this roll is capped by the armour value of the building that it's hit. So for instance, if a vehicle hit a concrete wall and the armour value of that concrete wall was 10, no matter what they rolled on their ram value, damaging themselves, it would be capped to 10. Bikes are worked out the same way, except for only the hit location they made contact with is damaged. There's no 4+ roll for any of the other locations due to their small size. On to hand-to-hand combat with vehicles. All vehicles can be engaged in hand-to-hand combat except skimmers unless they've landed, and how the hand-to-hand combat works depends on if the vehicle has a weapon skill stat or not. If the vehicle has exposed crew, then they must be engaged in hand-to-hand combat before any attacks can be carried out on the vehicle itself. Whether the vehicle has a weapon skill or not, the attacker may choose the location they wish to hit and may use close combat weapons, pistols or grenades. Also, the attacker gets a bonus armour penetration dice depending on their strength, as per the table, and will receive a bonus D6 armour penetration dice if the vehicle is immobilised or stationary. If the vehicle has a weapon skill stat, like a dreadnought, then it fights using the normal hand-to-hand combat rules. Also, it can break from combat without penalty if the model it's engaged with is smaller. If the vehicle does not have a weapon skill, then the attacker may hit it for every attack that it has, including the bonus attacks for having 2 close combat weapons. In this instance, grenades, pistols and any ranged weapon, providing it's not move or fire, may be used to attack the vehicle in close combat. Blast or area effect weapons are ignored, and sustained fire weapons only hit once, no sustained fire dice are rolled. The Tankfest article suggests a few changes to these original rules, and I'm inclined to agree with them, as they greatly increase vehicle survivability. First up, the penalty to charge a moving vehicle. If the vehicle is moving greater than 10 inches, then anyone trying to engage it to hand-to-hand combat must make a successful initiative test, with a 6 always failing. If they fail, they're hit by the vehicle's ram value. Note that each attacker must make an individual initiative test, with no cumulative bonuses for being the second or third attacker. If they pass the test, then they can attack as normal. If they fail and they are hit with the vehicle's ram value and they survive, then they are not prone and may not do anything for the rest of the turn except cast psychic powers. Second is a change to the bonus penetration dice. With only attackers using hand-to-hand combat weapons getting an additional bonus D6 to the armour penetration. The D6 for vehicles being immobilised or stationary is still available to all. Third, models attacking with ranged weapons in hand-to-hand only get 1 attack, irrelevant of how many attacks on their characteristics or from bonuses. This goes for attacking with grenades as well, only 1 attack, but with grenades you do get the bonus penetration dice on the previous table, and this is to simulate them being able to fit grenades down exhaust pipes in through vision slits and so forth. If a vehicle is destroyed in hand-to-hand combat and the result is an explosion, then any model in base contact with a vehicle gets a special out-of-sequence movement called It's Gonna Blow special rule. A D6 is rolled for each model in base contact, and the result is the number of inches that model gets to move away from the vehicle trying to get out of the blast template. This movement takes place in the hand-to-hand combat phase and cannot be used to re-engage with other models. 2 more things that I'm going to include under vehicle combat are hit and run attacks and pop-up attacks. Pop-up attacks can be done by skimmers that are either stationary or moving at slow speed in the movement phase and has to be declared instead of normal movement. In the shooting phase, this allows the skimmer to go 12 inches directly up and fire its weapons from that elevated position. Once the skimmer has fired its weapons, it drops back down to table level. Whilst on a pop-up attack, the skimmer may be engaged by units on Overwatch, but they will have to add an additional 12 inches to the range to the skimmer, whereas the skimmer doesn't suffer from the additional 12 inches of height. Hit and run attacks can be carried out in the movement phase by any rider or passenger of a bike vehicle, including skimmers, but it does stop them from firing in the shooting phase. 1 hit and run attack can be carried out per bike on a model that it passes during its movement phase, so anywhere along its travel. A round of hand-to-hand combat is worked out in the movement phase, but because of the quick nature of the engagement, each opponent can only roll 1 attack dice, and neither can parry. The bike counts as charging and is considered to have the higher initiative. Okay, lastly, and this is from Tankfest again, is the rules for vehicles having psychological effects on other models. Some of the data faxes towards the end of 2nd edition actually had these effects printed on them, such as the Hellhound. The weapon that it had, the giant flamethrower, actually caused fear. So if a unit was hit by that weapon, it would have to take a fear test. Or if enemy troops wanted to charge the Hellhound, they'd have to pass a fear test in order to charge it. A short list of fear-causing vehicles was provided in the article and is as follows: Land Raider, Lehman Russ Battle Tank, Predator, Orc Dreadnought, Space Marine Dreadnought and Eldar Dreadnoughts, although I'm assuming all Dreadnoughts would count, including Chaos Dreadnoughts. An addition to this was for super heavy battle tanks, which in 2nd edition was the Baneblade and the Shadow Sword, and these super heavies caused fear and terror, as per the normal rules. An important distinction to make here is that sometimes a vehicle may cause fear, or sometimes a weapon may cause fear if troops are hit by it. And sometimes both, the vehicle and a weapon that it carries, both cause fear. Okay, so now hopefully we've got an idea of how it works and the mechanics involved. We'll go to the tabletop and try and run through everything we've mentioned. Let's pick our target. We'll go for a Sisters of Battle Rhino, just there. Now, it doesn't matter how it looks, it just uses the standard data fax card for rhinos. So we use this one here. And then let's get some orc boys put them around here with some heavy weapons. Let's just say they're Death Skull mob, because each orc in a Death Skull mob can have a heavy weapon. And for those of you that are unaware, in 2nd edition, orcs have sort of lots of imperial weapons, such as las cannons, missile launchers, things like that. They do have a few orc custom weapons, but mostly they use sort of standard imperial weapons. So we've got 3 orcs, we've got a target, we say it's stationary, because the orc's going to find it hard enough to hit as it is, and consulting the Q&A for 2nd edition, a large target for them is Land Raider size or larger. So we're going to say no +1 for the Rhino. So we've got the orc boys there, the ballistic skill 3, no pluses for close range with missile launcher. Let's say they're firing crack missiles to have a chance to get through the armour. See how they do. Okay, so one's a miss straight off the bat. The other 2 are hits. They'd have needed a 4+. They got a 5 there. So what we do now is we grab the vehicle card. And as you can see here, D6 for location. So the 2 hits, let's roll to see which location on the Rhino they've hit. Oh, 2 5s again. Have to keep hold of these dice. That's a hull hit, which is the largest area on the chart. 2 to 5 equaling a hull hit. The easiest way to figure out whether it's front or side or rear is just take a 90-degree corner and place it to the front of the vehicle. And this one here. And then if the shots are coming inside that arc, then consider it the front or the side. Wherever you need to do it. So they're all on the front armour. Let's have a look at a crack missile. The crack missile is D6 plus D10 plus 8 for its armour penetration. So the hull on the front is 20. So you have to roll that for each hit to see if you can penetrate. So D10 plus D6 plus 8. So the first crack missile, 10, 19. So that's not penetration. Second one, that's better, 15 plus 8, 23. So that's through. One of the crack missiles has got through. Now you consult the data facts, find the hull damage and roll on that because it's penetrated the hull. 2 to 4. A large explosion tears through the crew compartment. Roll a d6 for each model on board. On a roll of 4, 5 or 6, they are hit and killed. Now, if you look at the front of the Rhino data facts, it would say crew, 1 Space Marine driver. Of course, in this case, it would be a Sisters of Battle. So we'll just roll 4+ for the driver. Okay, on our 4, 5, 6, they are hit and killed. So driver's safe. The vehicle is still operational. Okay, so the Rhino got away with that. It's had its hull penetrated, but the sister is still alive and it can function as normal. Now, as I previously mentioned, if a location is destroyed, any future hits on that are sort of not counted. So, for instance, number 6 on the locations chart is weapons, and let's say you had penetrated those and rolled a 2 to 5 on the damage table. The Rhino's bolters and auto launchers are destroyed. So that's it. You don't have to try and penetrate and then roll on this damage table again in the hope of getting a 6, which means the explosion goes back into the hull and it can end up blowing up the whole vehicle. If you end up getting that 2 to 5, they're destroyed. Obviously, any future rolls of 6 on the locations table, the weapons are destroyed and the hit will not do anything. Unless, of course, it's an area effect weapon, and then it may affect the other locations on the vehicle, which we'll go into now. Okay, so on to templates on vehicles. Let's just say this Death Skull guy here's got a heavy plasma gun and he's going to fire on maximum power at the vehicle. So he designates a location that he wants to hit. So let's just go for hull at the front there. So that's impacting on the front. Now roll to hit. Let's just say it's a standard. The vehicle's stationary again. So the Orc's hitting on 4+. and it's a miss. So at this point, the template would deviate from the location that you placed it. 10 inches that way. Okay, and that's where the shot would fall, following the normal deviation rules. Now, let's just say that shot hit. So you'd roll for location, so this may actually move. Although you were aiming for the hull at the front, it may move depending on what you roll here. So we'll grab the Rhino data facts card and check it out. 6. So weapons. It's gone up a little bit and it's hit onto the weapons there. So that's its primary location. Now, according to the main rules, you would then roll a 4+ for every other location affected. And to be honest, that's pretty much the hull and the track. So let's try for the hull. Yep, so that's been affected by the blast, and the track. So yeah, they've both been affected by the blast. Pretty devastating blow on the Rhino there. Now, the armour penetration for a heavy plasma on maximum power is D6 plus D10 plus 10. So we're hitting at the front again. Let's go for hull. 20 we need to beat. No, didn't quite do it. 10, 4, 5, 6, 7, 17. Track is a lot lower, 15 on the front. Okay, no problem. 24 there, so that's gone through the track. So immediately roll for damage on the track table. 5. 2 to 5. The track is blown off. The Rhino moves out of control next turn and then comes to a permanent halt for the rest of the battle. Okay, so not too bad. If you've got a squad of troops in the back there, at least they're going to survive for now. Last but not least, the hit on the weapons. That's a roll for penetration. Yep, with the 5 plus the 5 plus 10, 20, easily penetrated. There are 12 on the front. Let's roll on the weapons table. Right, I think we all know what that means from the earlier chat. The Rhino's bolters and auto launchers are destroyed as above, but the explosion causes a secondary explosion in the hull. Roll on the hull damage table to find out what effect this second explosion has. Okay, so now it has ended up penetrating the hull through the weapons. Oh, 5. The Rhino's engine explodes, killing everybody on board. The Rhino is spun round to face in a random direction by the force of the explosion and then comes to a permanent halt. So, unfortunately, any troops being carried didn't make it. And then, of course, you could just use a scatter die to decide which way it was pointing using the little arrow there. And it would end in that with everyone dead. Also, on the minuses to hit, as we previously covered, this vehicle, if it had been moving between 10 and 20 in its last turn when it was fired at, that would have been a -1 to hit. And if it had been going over 20, it would have been a -2 to hit. So let's quickly look at the vehicle's move rate. It can, at fast speed, do 25 inches. So there is a possibility that moving fast may have kept it alive, especially with the Orcs' bad ballistic skill and lack of targeters and things like that. Of course, the other thing that I haven't mentioned yet is the cover rules. And so the vehicle could have maybe claimed some cover, and we'll just go through how that would have worked in the main rules. Okay, so let's say there's some cover there that could block the Rhino, something like that. Now, those Orcs can see the Rhino through the cover, but it's over 1/3 obscured, so the Rhino could claim cover from this. And because this is hard cover and not soft cover, as stated in the standard rules, that would be a -2 for the Orcs to hit. So that would be a 6 necessary to actually hit the Rhino. Now, once the Rhino was hit, if you successfully rolled a 6, you'd roll for locations as normal. Okay, so on to the Tankfest sort of article suggested changes. Now, under the cover rules for vehicles there, the 3 Orcs here could have fired at the Rhino without the -2 for cover. But if they rolled a location that was obscured to them by the cover, the hard cover would intercept the shot. So let's see how that would work now. I think it'd probably be best to roll for the Orcs individually on this because they can see different bits of the vehicle. So let's say this Orc here really can only see the weapons on top. So he's going to roll to hit as normal on a 4+, no minuses. Okay, and he's hit. Now he's going to roll for location, 6, and he's actually got the weapon. So that worked out pretty well. It's not obstructed by the terrain, so he didn't get the -2, and he has hit the location of the vehicle that he can actually see. So let's go for this guy. He can see the turret, the tracks here, probably the weapons, but not the hull. So let's go for a hit, see if he hits. He hits. Let's go for location, 4. So that's the hull. So the hull for him is obscured. So he's struck this. Now, what you have to do now is decide what the armor value of this is, either before the game or during the game. One of the examples in the book said that steel would be about 25 for armor penetration, so pretty high. Either way, the terrain has absorbed the shot, so you could just not work out the destruction of the terrain and say the shot's been absorbed and carry on playing, or if you wanted to, you could roll to penetrate and then see if it's destroyed. And we'll forget about the third orc, as the second one was a good example of how the cover can intercept the shot. Okay, now on to the suggested blast marker rules. Now, that works just like before. You roll to hit with modifiers. You roll for location. Let's just say it's hull. And then the 4+ for any other location, fully or partially under the template. But the suggested rules are to then half the armor penetration for all those additional locations that are hit. So let's say plasma on low energy again would be a D6 plus D10 plus 10. So that would be fully on the hull if it hit. Okay, not looking good there. So that's 24. That's definitely penetrated the hull. But then if you rolled for weapons or tracks, you would half it. So let's go again for tracks. Okay, 12, 22. So that's half to 11. No penetration. And the weapons, which is 12 to equal or beat. 10, 24, half 12. So it did penetrate the weapons. Even halved because of their low armor value. But you can see how it does give the vehicle a little bit more survivability. Now, the other thing I'm just going to mention at this point, it was the minus to armor penetration for distance. Now, the first category in that distance is 24 inches. So as you can see, the Rhino is clearly inside the 24, and so wouldn't suffer any minus to the power of the weapon trying to penetrate it. But once you get above 24, it's -1 and -2 and so forth. Okay, so next up, we'll just quickly cover the Overwatch rules for vehicles. Now, this doesn't have many weapons of Rhino, but it does have the bolters at the top. So, okay, hopefully we all know how Overwatch works generally, but we'll put these orcs behind here. Let's say the Rhino starts here. It's moving at slow speed, 8 inches, up to here. Now, if you declare Overwatch, weapons controlled by the driver can't be fired. And in a Rhino, there's only one crew member, the driver. So the bolters would be operated by them. So they cannot fire on Overwatch. They could fire as normal in the shooting phase, but not on Overwatch because they're concentrating on driving. Now, because it's a transport vehicle, it could have a squad of sisters in there. And if that's the case, then 2 are able to fire out of this top hatch, and 2 would be able to fire out of these hatches on the side, I guess potentially front and back, depending on how the vehicle's configured. So that's moved. The vehicle's on Overwatch. You'd put an Overwatch counter on there just to show it like that. And then in the orc turn, should the orcs break cover over here, let's say they're march moving or double moving, running 8 inches. As they broke cover there or came round towards the Rhino, the sisters from these hatches and this hatch could engage them with whatever weapons they were armed with, bolters or whatnot. So they could still defend the vehicle. Now, if this was a tank, for instance, with response and weapons and turret and all that sort of thing, then those gunners could rotate and fire. Although in the Tankfest, it does state that turrets, this doesn't technically count as a turret, would have a reduced 90-degree arc of fire. So if the player did think that the orcs were going to break cover in this turn, they'd have to rotate the turret to be facing that direction in order to get a successful overwatch shot on those orcs. Okay, so on to vehicle ramming and overrun. The rhino's there. Let's put some orc boys here. So the vehicle has to be moving 10 inches or over to actually hit a model, otherwise they can just step to the side without any rolls to test. So the vehicle's combat speed is 18, so it can either accelerate from slow up to 18, or it might have already been doing combat speed. So we'll move the rhino the 18 inches. Okay, bringing it past all the orcs. Now we have to roll to see if these orcs got out of the way or not. Now an orc's initiative is pretty low. It's 2 for normal orc boys. So the first one is testing on his standard initiative. And he's failed, so we'll lay him down. He's been hit. The next one gets a +1 for being the second person. He's still failed. So he's hit. Now this guy's orc's getting +2. So 4 or below. No, he's hit. And 5 or below. Yes, that orc made it. Quick enough to get out of the way. Bearing in mind, of course, that on this initiative roll for ramming and overruns, a 6 is always a fail. And that isn't a standard thing across second edition, a 6 being an automatic fail or an automatic success. Okay, so now these 3 orcs have been hit by the ram value of the rhino, which is strength 7, d12 damage, -5 save modifier. So pretty deadly. For these orcs, it's just going to be a 2+ to wound and no save modifier possible. Oh, well, one lucky one survived. It failed to wound. Those 2 are dead. This one gets to stand back up and carry on in its turn. Now, of course, the vehicle will also take a hit from the orcs, but probably not going to do any damage at all. The minimum armor penetration is 12 needed, and the roll for hitting infantry is a d6 plus their toughness. Now an orc is toughness 4. Even if you get a 6, it's a maximum of 10. So nowhere on the vehicle can be harmed by hitting the orcs, as you would expect. It's more for lighter vehicles and buggies and things of that nature. And the Tankfest article again adds to this, saying that successful initiative test from this orc here only gives it 2 inches of movement to get out of the track of the vehicle's path. So in this instance, I would say it was probably just enough just to get it clear. The rhino's just under 3 inches in width. Just over 3 inches in width. So there's a good chance, depending on where the orc stood, that it should be able to get to the edge. But on maybe some of the bigger vehicles, like a Baneblade or such, you wouldn't actually be able to clear the width of the vehicle. Okay, so on to vehicles ramming buildings or other vehicles. So as previously stated, if a vehicle moves out of control or deliberately wishes to ram, then let's say the rhino's ramming the Gobsmasher, then the first location actually touched by the model is automatically hit. So in this instance, that would be the wheel. And then it's a 4+ for every other location. So on the Gobsmasher, the other locations are the gun and the hull. So go for hull, no, and the gun, no. So it's basically just a hit on the wheel. And that would use the rhino's ram value in an attempt to penetrate the Gobsmasher's wheel. The armor value of the Gobsmasher wheel is 15, and the ram value of the rhino is strength 7, d12 damage. So for working out armor penetration, a d6 is added, plus the 7 for its strength, and then plus a d12 for its damage. So that would be 7 plus whatever I roll on these. Okay, terrible. So that's 10. Not enough to penetrate the Gobsmasher's wheel, and the vehicle comes away unscathed. Vehicles colliding with buildings. So Rhino goes out of control, or for whatever reason decides to ram that building there. Again, we're going in. First point of contact takes a hit, so I would say in this case it would be hull, as it's hit it square on. Now, to work out armour penetration for the vehicle, it uses its own RAM value. So as we previously worked out, it would be a D6, D12 plus 7, and that would be used against itself to see if it penetrates the hull, which, as we know on a Rhino, would be 20 from the front. Now, the difference when you're hitting a building is that the penetration coming back at the Rhino is limited by the armour value of the building. So, say before the game we agree that the buildings are an armour value of 20, plascrete or some material like that. So it would be limited to a maximum of 20. In this instance, it doesn't help the Rhino, as the cap of 20 would still penetrate the hull. So let's work that out now. 7 plus these, 12, so nowhere near penetrating the Rhino's hull. But of course, there was a 4 plus for every other location. So track and weapons. Let's go for track. Yes, they were hit. And weapons, yes, they were hit. So track first, we roll for penetration again, using again the Rhino's RAM value. And that's a pretty good roll. That is 22. So, oops, that's gone through on the Rhino's track. Although, sorry, that 22 would be limited to 20 because of the armor value of the building being 20. But still, it's enough to penetrate the 15 for track. We roll on the track damage. 2. The track is blown off. The Rhino moves out of control next turn and then comes to a permanent halt for the rest of the battle. So that's that done. Weapons, let's roll for penetration using again the Rhino's armor value. Oh, that might still be enough. 17, yeah. Penetrate the weapons. Don't ask me how the weapons got hit, but that's just the way it is. Roll on the damage table. 1. The Rhino's bolters and auto launchers are damaged and may only be fired if you first roll a 4 or more on a D6. So you've got a immobilised Rhino with intermittent bolter use at the end of this phase. Now, to penetrate the building, it's the RAM value again against the building's armour value of 20. So we'll roll to see if it damaged the building. So that's a no, nowhere near. If you do manage to penetrate the building, then there is a table in the main rule book, and you can roll on that to see if the building collapses or something like that. Okay, and last but not least, on the ramming side of things, bikes have their own sort of little bit of rules there, as previously mentioned. So if a vehicle was to ram the bike, it's the same sort of process, but if the bike was to ram the vehicle or a building, there's no need for the 4 plus rolls for other locations because the bike is so small, it's not going to damage those other locations. So let's say the bike goes out of control, or we've got a suicidal chaplain here, as I'm sure most of them are. Accelerates over 10 again because it counts for vehicles. You have to be going 10 or over to cause damage to another vehicle, building, or hit an infantry model. It's the same for everything. So he's travelled over 10, zipped into the side of the Rhino. The location's touched, a hit, so it's a hull. Definitely hit. No 4 pluses for the other locations. And apart from that, the rules are pretty much the same. One thing I did fail to mention earlier in the video, and I think it counts under vehicle combat, is the arcs of fire for bikes. So a rider of a bike may fire a pistol weapon for 360-degree arc. And if the bike has a passenger, such as a sidecar or some such thing, then the passenger can fire up to a basic weapon for a 360-degree arc also. Just a little point for bikes there that I forgot to mention. Okay, so on to hand-to-hand combat with vehicles. For this example, we use the Orc War Buggy because it has exposed crew. I'll just use these Space Marines here. Okay, so in the main rules, the Marines would declare a charge against the buggy, as usual. Then you'd move chargers, but you'd have to engage the exposed crew first before you can attack the vehicle. So the first Marine in would say, go for the driver. Second Marine in would go for the gunner. And the third here would be able to actually attack the vehicle unhindered. Now, these two would fight a normal round of hand-to-hand combat, and if you're not sure how that works, then I've done a video, follow the link and check that out. this guy gets to attack the vehicle. Now, in hand-to-hand combat against vehicle, he can choose location, but in the case of the Orc war buggy, it only has 2 locations, crew and the war buggy itself, so he'd just be attacking the war buggy. He'd be able to use pistols, hand-to-hand combat weapons, or grenades against the vehicle, and he'd also get the bonus armor penetration dice, depending on the strength of the weapon he's using, as per the table in the rulebook. Also, if the vehicle was stationary or immobilized for whatever reason, there'd be an additional D6 to the penetration. So let's quickly just work out, in this instance, what this Marine would be rolling against the war buggy. Okay, so we'll ignore the 2 Marines fighting the crew. That's just normal combat. Our 3rd Marine here is attacking the vehicle. So let's see what he's got. He's got a power axe, which in 2nd you can use single or double-handed. In this case, he's going to have to use it single-handed because he's got a storm shield in the other hand. So that means the penetration of the power axe single-handed is 2d6 plus 6. So the normal combat rules apply. He can strike anywhere, any location on the vehicle, but as we know, there's only 2, crew and war buggy, so he's attacking the war buggy with 2d6 plus 6 to beat the armor value of 10. Now, because there's a bonus to penetration of vehicles in hand-to-hand combat, a strength 5, which is the power axe on single-handed, gets an additional d6 to armor penetration. So now he's rolling 3d6 plus 6 to get through the 10, which shouldn't be too difficult. Again, there's an additional d6 if the vehicle was immobilized or stationary in its last turn, then he'd have an additional d6 to try and penetrate the vehicle's armor. But in this case, he's got the 2 dice plus 6 for the power axe single-handed, and he's got the extra dice because the power axe is strength 5, so he gets that extra penetration bonus for hand-to-hand combat with a vehicle. Now, he's only got 1 attack. He's a normal assault marine, 1 attack, so he gets to hit the vehicle once in the location of his choice. Now, if he had 2 hand-to-hand combat weapons, he would get 2 attacks, so he'd get 2 free hits at that penetration anywhere on the vehicle. But as it's a storm shield, it's not a hand-to-hand combat weapon, it's a shield. And although it can be used to parry, there's no indication that it can be used to give you an extra attack. So for this instance, we're just going to go for the 1 attack from that Marine. So here we go. And this is plus 6. Oh, 10. So he only just done it there, even with the bonus die. 10, but equal or over to penetrate, and that would have penetrated. And just for fun, we'll see what he would have got. 5. Oh dear. The war buggy's engine explodes, killing the crew. The wreck hurtles out of control next turn before coming to a permanent halt. Now, because the vehicle has blown up, it doesn't necessarily mean it's got an area of effect. So the Marines wouldn't necessarily have to use the it's going to blow special rule to now try and get distance from the vehicle. The danger here would be next turn if the vehicle's out of control, moving and striking one of the Marines and working out a collision that way. But just because it said it exploded in the description, it actually has to give an area effect of explosion for the Marines to worry about that. Okay, so that's with an exposed crew vehicle. Now, if the vehicle, exposed or otherwise, would have had a weapon skill, then it would be worked out just like normal hand-to-hand combat. So, for instance, with the Orc Dreadnought here, the Marines would have just declared a charge, moved in, and you would have worked out normal hand-to-hand combat as per my hand-to-hand combat video. So, if a vehicle does not have exposed crew, and it does not have a weapon skill, then it's worked out just like the last one against the buggy, but everyone would get to do that. So the Marines declare the charge, they move in, and they can all just pick a location to attack. Of course, it has to be within reach. So you could probably say hull and wheels would be within reach of the attackers in this instance. Okay, so in this instance, all 3 Marines can freely attack the Gob Smasher. Now, they've got bolt pistols and chainsaws, so 2 close combat weapons. So these Marines here would have 2 attacks, 1 for their characteristic and an additional die for the fact they've got 2 hand-to-hand combat weapons. Now, these Marines do have crack grenades, so that should probably give them a chance to defeat the Gob Smasher's armour. And remember, a vehicle without weapon skill, you can use pistols, grenades, hand-to-hand combat weapons, the same as against vehicles with weapon skill. But if the vehicle doesn't have a weapon skill, then you can also use ranged weapons that are not move or fire against it as well. Okay, so we'll work it out. Of course, we've got the 2 attacks. He's only got the 1 attack on his attack characteristic. As I've mentioned, the shield can be used in hand-to-hand combat, but technically isn't a hand-to-hand combat weapon. So we'll work it out. 2 attacks. Again, they're not, you don't have to roll for these. There's not an opposing weapon skill. So they literally just get to choose a location that's within reach and attack it. Now, the first Marine is going to put 2 attacks into the wheel, and he's using crack grenades. So it's 2d6 plus 6 for penetration, plus the strength of a crack grenade is 6, so you get an additional d12 for armor penetration. And if it was immobilized or stationary, he'd get that additional d6. So these lot plus 6 to penetrate the Gob Smasher's wheel, which, let's say side, it's the same, front, side and rear armor is all 15. Okay, 15. Well, that was easily done with the plus 6, 21. So he's easily penetrated that with the first attack. So you'd roll for damage immediately. Okay, 5. The Gob Smasher's wheel is blown off. The Gob Smasher will move out of control next turn and come to a permanent halt for the rest of the battle. Okay, and just a reminder about the situation with ranged weapons. Again, if this Marine with a plasma gun had charged the vehicle to engage it in hand-to-hand combat, because the plasma gun is not move or fire, he could have come in and engaged there and then fired at the vehicle. Because it doesn't have a weapon skill, he can use a ranged weapon against it. But blast markers and sustained fire dice would not be rolled to see how many shots you get. You literally just get the 1 hit on it. Now, if by chance this character happened to have a couple of attacks in his attack characteristic, it could still only attack the vehicle once with the plasma gun. As sustained fire weapons can only hit once, and you don't roll the sustained fire dice. So it would limit the amount of times he could attack. But if he was using crack grenades, for instance, he could hit it as many times as his attack characteristic or bonus attacks allowed. Okay, so the suggested changes in Tankfest to the rules that we've just covered state that models charging a vehicle that's moved over 10 inches need to take an initiative test or be hit by the ram value of the vehicle, meaning that you can't just move up to a vehicle that's doing 30 inches fast speed and just hit it with an axe. There's an element of risk involved. So for instance, these Marines here declare the charge, they come in for the charge, they're in charge range. Initiative of Space Marine, normal Assault Marines is 4, so 1 to 4, they make it no issues. There we are, so 2 6s. One of them made it in, the first 2 have actually taken a hit from the vehicle. Now, the RAM value of the Gob Smasher is strength 7, d12 damage, so pretty hefty. That's a 2 to wound for both of those. Both wounded, it's a -4 armor save with a strength 7, so even powered armor doesn't give him a save. And that's those 2 Marines dead. So, as you can see, it's not a bad rule. I quite like it in the fact that vehicles can keep themselves safe by moving at a certain speed. Or at least tried to keep themselves safe by moving at a certain speed. Now, as you notice, there wasn't a cumulative +1 for the second Marine to his initiative test, because that's only for when vehicles do overrun attacks and they're trying to attack the infantry. If you're charging out of the vehicle, everyone just takes a standard initiative test. Also, if you do get hit by the vehicle but survive, then you may do nothing for the rest of the turn unless you're a psyker, and then you can cast psychic powers in the psychic phase. The next suggested change is to the bonus armor penetration dice. If you remember, there's a table that we used earlier from the main rules. In Tankfest, it suggests that only models using hand-to-hand combat weapons get any bonus armor penetration dice. So, for instance, and that would be across the board. It wouldn't be the table. That would be a D6. So anyone attacking the vehicle with a hand-to-hand combat weapon gets an additional D6. So let's just work that out now. We've got the guy with the power axe. He's using it single-handed. So that's 2D6 plus 5. He's got 1 attack, so he gets to hit freely any location. We're going to go for the wheel. He will get that additional D6 added to that because he's using hand-to-hand combat weapons. So if he was using a basic weapon or a plasma gun or a melter gun or something like that, then he wouldn't get that bonus dice. So let's see how he gets on. We know the wheel's an armor value of 15. Again, if the vehicle was stationary or immobilized, he'd get an additional D6 on top of that D6 for using hand-to-hand combat weapons. So let's see how he gets on. Plus 5. Oh, not bad. 15, 16, 17, 18. So he's penetrated to 15 for the wheel with the power axe. So we would roll to see what happens to the Gob Smasher like we did on the last example. Now, it's only a D6, so that makes a big difference. So it doesn't matter how powerful the weapon is you're hitting the vehicle with, like a power fist or something like that, lightning claws, you are still only going to get that D6 bonus across the board. Tankfest also suggests that models attacking with ranged weapons, such as our plasma gun Marine from earlier, will only get the 1 attack with that weapon, no matter how many attacks in their attack characteristic or bonus attacks from any other source. Also with grenades, you can attack the vehicle with grenades, but you only get the 1 attack, 1 grenade. The only difference with the grenades is it does allow the bonus armor penetration dice from the table from earlier, stating that they feel that it would be easier to get grenades into smaller crevices in the vehicle and thus cause that extra damage to the vehicle. So the last thing I'm going to cover in this section is the It's Going to Blow special rule. I did mention it earlier, the It's Going to Blow special rule. So when a vehicle does detonate immediately and creates an area effect, infantry or enemy engaged with the vehicle get to roll a D6 and get to move that far away from the vehicle, hopefully getting them out of the blast. But of course it's a D6, it's random. And also one of the caveats of the It's Going to Blow special rule is that you can't re-engage an enemy model in hand-to-hand combat. So for instance, if the Gob Smasher was going to blow up and the Marine was going to get to roll his dice, he gets to move 4 inches away, which would get you out of most blast areas as they normally maximum of 3, but he could not then engage that Orc in hand-to-hand combat, probably move over here or something like that, and that would get him away from the blast area. Now, each model has to roll independently for the movement, so some might make it, some might not. Okay, now 2 more things of note for vehicle combat is the pop-up attack that skimmers can do, or the hit and run attacks which any bike, including skimmer bikes, jet bikes, can do. And we'll just quickly run through that now. Now, what a pop-up attack allows the land speeder to do is in its movement phase declare that it's going to perform a pop-up attack. That means it gives up its normal movement for that turn. But in the shooting phase, it can now rise to 12 inches off the table, bringing it up to here, which is completely off camera, but just so you can see, bringing it up quite high up here, and then it can fire its weapons at any targets that it can see, the Gob Smasher in this case. Once it's fired all its weapons, it can move right back down to where it started, in cover or behind whatever it was behind. And as I previously mentioned, the only real way you have to intercept that is to have units on overwatch waiting for the vehicle to pop up and then engaging it. But if you do so, you have to add that 12 inches in height to the attacking range, whereas the land speeder doesn't have to add the 12 inches in height when engaging its target. Okay, so hit and run attacks are carried out in the movement phase of the bike. So anywhere along the bike's movement, it can conduct a hit and run attack against a model that it passes in pretty much base-to-base contact. So in this instance, we're going to say the chaplain drives, rides 18 inches there, just past the orc. And he can carry out a round of combat against that orc in the movement phase. Now, because of the nature of the attack, it's like a normal hand-to-hand combat round, except for both opponents are restricted to one attack die each, and they may not parry. So the orc's got a sword type chopper, so maybe he could have parried, but he can't in this instance, and the chaplain can't parry. He's got a Crozius Arcanum, so that doesn't allow a parry. So we've got the one attack die. Neither of them can parry. The chaplain counts as +1 for charging, and should it be a draw, he would have the higher initiative, count as having the higher initiative. So you'd literally work that out as it happened in the movement phase. So let's say the orc boy's got a weapon skill of 3, the chaplain's got a weapon skill of 5, 11 for the chaplain. Oh dear, fumbles, a 12 for the chaplain, 3 for the orc. He gets thumped loads of times by the Crozius Arcanum. He'll more likely be gone, and he will just ride on. Now, the only real problem with this for the chaplain is that he will not get to fire his weapons in the shooting phase. This counts as his attack. And of course, he can only attack one model, no matter how far he moves. It's just the one model that can be engaged. And last but not least is the rules around vehicles causing fear or terror. Now, of course, only super heavy vehicles in 2nd edition cause terror, such as the Baneblade or the Shadow Sword. But in this instance, if the Dreadnought were to charge against the Space Marines, they would have to take a fear test. And if they failed, they would suffer certain minuses for that in hand-to-hand combat. Or if the Marines wished to charge the Dreadnought, they would have to pass a fear test in order to charge the Dreadnought. And that's pretty much it. Terror is just another step up, and although Terror you only have to roll for once in 2nd edition, you have to roll for fear continuously. So even if you passed a Terror test to charge a Baneblade, it would still always cause fear. Whew, okay, well I think that pretty much wraps up vehicle combat. I'm not sure I've missed anything, but please let me know in the comments below if I have. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope it made sense, and thanks for watching.